In this video, I'm going to give you 6 sweet different techniques for keeping your feet warm when you're hiking, backpacking, and adventuring in the outdoors. My name's Aaron Linsdow. I'm a polar explorer and professional adventurer. I've had a lot of cold feet and unenjoyable nights because I didn't know about all these tips that I'm sharing with you in this whole video series. Check out the link below to keep your feet warm. 15 different videos on all sorts of great ideas. So tip number 1 is make sure you don't put anything on your sleeping bag that is not down. That is, when you're in your sleeping bag and you're getting all fluffed up and like, oh man, it's really chilly, I should put some extra insulation on there. Oh good, I just happen to have this sweater, so I'm going to put the sweater on my sleeping bag and then drop it down. But look what happens. This sweater, because it's not made of down, actually crushes the insulation in the sleeping bag, squashes it, and actually causes the bag to lose loft, which in turn causes your feet to get cold because the down is now squished, and when the down is squished, it can't insulate as well as when you don't have anything on there. So make sure that in a desperate moment where your sleeping bag is inadequate, only use down coats, jackets, or blankets to put on down, because the down is light. It will effectively add another warmth layer versus something like my sweater. Even though it's nice and warm, you can see that it actually crushes the down and makes the sleeping bag feel colder. The second tip in this video as a corollary to that is make sure you do not jam your feet all the way to the end of your sleeping bag, because what'll happen is you'll do the exact same thing. So if you get your feet and they're stuffed all the way in the sleeping bag because you didn't purchase a long enough sleeping bag and you really get your feet squashed against there, what'll happen is you'll compress the down on the end of the sleeping bag and you'll actually make your feet really cold. So when I'm in a sleeping bag, I never ever jam my feet into it because I'm 6 feet tall. I don't know how many centimeters that is, but I'm 6 feet tall and I've got an additional 6 inches above my bag because my bag's 6 feet 6 long, so that's that's like 15 centimeters extra above my head. So when I get in my sleeping bag, I actually have quite a bit of space in my foot box area so I don't squash the down and make my feet cold. That's a big consideration. The next tip number 3, is to make sure not to press your bag against the tent wall, because the same sort of thing happens. If you wriggle around a lot and you end up jammed against the tent wall, you end up crushing the down and squashing it in your sleeping bag, causing it to lose its insulative properties, and that'll be squished in there and you'll freeze and your feet will be cold and you won't know why. It's because you've got your sleeping bag against the tent. Now before I go on with tip number 4, check out the link below to this whole playlist of 15 different videos on how to keep your feet warm in the outdoors, and also check the link to my How to Keep Your Feet Warm book, available at major retailers and online. There's a link right below. And also, if you found this video useful, please like, comment, and subscribe on the channel. Perfect. Now, tip number 4 is to use a double sock system. And what I mean by that is using a sock and then another sock on top of that. My favorite socks are the Right socks. Full disclosure, I am not sponsored by Right socks. I'm not sponsored by Smartwool. This is just only my experience and what's worked for me for over 20 years in some of the coldest places on earth, because Right socks actually are woven, so they actually have 2 socks in them. So effectively, I end up with 3 socks. It's pretty slick. So what I do is I put my right sock on, which has 2-layer socks, which prevents friction and helps reduce blisters. And then on top of that, I add whatever my appropriate Smartwool sock is, and this system works incredibly well in my climbing boots, in my polar ski boots from Norway, just about everywhere. It works really, really well. I've been super happy with this system. Can't recommend it enough. Plus, it reduces friction, does all sorts of nice things. Now, when you get your boots, make sure, if you're going to do that, to bring your socks and bring the biggest socks and combo you're going to get when you get your boot, because if your boot's too tight, you're toast, right? So the next thing about insulating yourself, tip number 5, is to make sure not to use a cot or a hammock if you have problems with your feet getting cold, because by putting yourself on a cot or in a hammock, that airflow under your body acts like a super thick air mat, which will cause you to stay cold because your body cannot warm up that airspace. So if you like sleeping on cots and off the ground, know that you're going to be extra cold and you need foam insulation or something between you and that cot in order to stay warm. It's a big consideration, and you only will find this out when you've frozen many, many times in your tent. By doing that, is you really don't want to freeze by using a cot or a hammock. My 6th tip is to avoid relying on chemical foot warmers. Now, why do I say that? You say, oh, Aaron, foot warmers are great. Well, if you're constantly relying on foot warmers, that means your sock and your boot system is inadequate for the conditions, because what if your foot warmer dies? What if it doesn't work? Or what if you lose them and you're relying on that to keep your feet warm? You're going to freeze and have miserable feet. So even though I might suggest keeping 1 or 2 of these for backup, they really are a crutch and an indication that your equipment is not adequate for your condition. So that's tip number 6. Don't rely on foot warmers to keep you warm in the conditions, because the Swedish, I think it's a Swedish say, if it's too cold, put extra clothes on. Oh, it's really too cold. Well, you just brought inadequate gear. That's what they say, something like that, but it's in Swedish, of course. So my name is Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and professional adventurer. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel and the video. And check out my links below to how to keep your feet warm in the cold, and also links to this whole video series on keeping your feet warm in the cold. Thank you very much for watching, and enjoy your adventures requiring these boots.